female entrepreneurs. I mean, she had a ton of accolades happen. But most people don't make that distinction between being self-employed and being a business owner. There is a difference. And there's a lot of people running around who are self-employed who think they're business owners.
That's right.
So let's just start right there with some really good content. Like, what is the difference between those two things?
So being self-employed, you have to show up. Like a lot of times people think, oh, I'm building a business. No, you just created a job for yourself, because if you don't show up to the team, to the brick and mortar, for the workshop, for the webinar, you're not going to make money. Yeah. Building a business is building an engine that can continually print money while you go do what you want, be with your family, go to the soccer games, hang out with your friends. And so I saw what my dad missed, and I wanted to make sure to do it different. And I knew that I needed a team and I needed scale in order to do that, so that I could go to Starbucks in the middle of the day or fly here to be able to see you and do this interview. But most people end up building themselves a job, which turns into a cage. And then they end up getting these golden handcuffs because they have pride and responsibility, and they're making money, and they don't realize that they've just traded their freedom away to basically to become an entrepreneur, but really they're just an employee of this new entity that they own, and it owns them. Yeah,
that is like so true, because I've been self-employed only. You really don't even have one job. You have like 11.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of times it's almost worse than being an employee, because if you're an employee, you can actually leave and you're not responsible for the light bill.
Right.
You don't get to pay the rent on the office and the other stuff like that. And so a lot of people listen to this. Now, what would you say? We're going somewhere I wasn't sure we would go this early, but so someone's listening to this, they're like, you know what? I kind of am self-employed. Most of my income or all the responsibility in my business is incumbent upon me. Should they look at doing a different business or a different way of doing the business that they're in? So what would you say to them?
So really, I feel context is important. We may be sitting here saying that like, hey, it might not be great to be self-employed, but if you love what you do and you just want to do it for yourself because you don't want to work for anyone else, that's okay.
Sure.
But just know what you're building, right? And so if the idea is to then be able to retire when you're 40 or, do this for 20 years and retire, and you don't scale an actual business, you're going to be stuck in that same place. So if someone's sitting here going, oh gosh, because I've worked with entrepreneurs that they're like, oh gosh, I didn't realize I was building myself a job. What do I need to do? How can you replace yourself in all of these roles, right? And there's a couple ways you can truly do it, because I'm a lot about tactics, right? So we can take a look at what you're currently earning in your small business, being self-employed, and figure out what you actually make as an hourly rate. And you can do this monthly or annually, figure out how many hours you're working, what you're actually bringing home, your net profit or your wages, depending on how you pay yourself out of your business. Figure out what that hourly rate is. And the fastest thing you can do is find who can you hire to do one of those roles, whether it's answering the phones or emails or working with customers or the actual services or products, and how can you replace yourself in the business? And then you just do that over and over and over with each one of those roles. Now you have a team. The challenge is most entrepreneurs don't decide if they want to be the entrepreneur, if they are the manager, or if they're actually the talent inside of the business.
Oh, wow. And
if you don't architect that in the beginning, you're going to actually build something that you're probably going to hate, which is what I see most people do in business.
You know what? You reminded me of the E-Myth. Have you read the E-Myth?
A long time ago.
Did you really read the E-Myth? Okay. Yeah. So most people in this generation have read the E-Myth, but it was written by a crazy dude named Michael Gerber, who was actually crazy brilliant. And he talks about that in the book, the difference between, somebody who's an entrepreneur and somebody who works in their own business. And so, like if you own a bakery, are you actually a baker? Or do you own a business that sells baking goods, right? And you have to make those distinctions when you're an entrepreneur. So the reason I wanted you on is you're tactic heavy. Like you're known for tactical stuff. So everybody, the rest of this interview, we're going to get real granular on some different things. We're also going to talk about how to build a life too, because Candy woke up at one point at 40 and had a bunch of money, but didn't have a bunch of life. And so you can have a bunch of money and not be rich. You can not live richly. But one of the things you just said, I want to acknowledge, I still am cheap and struggle with what you just said, that I would be wealthier and I would have been happier. And I've had a lot of happiness and I built a lot of wealth. I'm done okay on that stuff. However, I would have more of it had I been willing to evaluate what you just said. What am I doing that I could actually replace myself and pay somebody for? But I was such a control freak and also cheap from time to time as an entrepreneur that I didn't invest ahead of myself to scale and give myself a life. So I want to acknowledge that. The other thing that's happening right now is I think by every measurement, we're in a recession right now. I think we're in one. Now, to the depth of it, the length of it, I'm not capable of forecasting that yet. Maybe I'll never be capable of doing that. If we could forecast that, no one would lose money in recessions, right? But you have like 6 things that you can recession-proof your life and your business with. You don't have to share all 6. But if someone's listening to this right now and they're like, I think we're in a recession, what are some recession-proof strategies?
Well, first I want to say that when you hear that word, it invokes a lot of fear in people. And it's specifically designed to do that, right? Because that's what people click on. That's what news topics are all about. Yeah. But you have to remember the most important part. Nothing that happens in our country's economy will ever be more important than what happens in your own personal economy. And if you take the steps to really recession-proof your life and you do really well in the good times so that you can set yourself up to do well in the bad times too. Like, and what does that mean? It's all the non-sexy stuff, like live within your means. Like for years within my business, I wasn't making massive amounts of money, but I was living beneath my means. I was saving and investing money into real estate starting at 20 years old. So rather than going and buying all the fancy things that most people do, I was looking at this long game. How do I actually do this in 20 years and be able to retire and quit and be able to do whatever I want? So the first thing is that always remember that whatever you do is far more important and that there's always opportunity. That's why when I did the research for the book since 2020, there has been more billionaires made than any other time in history. Because when one area or industry goes bad, there's so much opportunity. So it's always keeping that in mind. Because if you're focused on the reality of, the economic downturn, and that's all you focus on, then you're going to miss the opportunity that's right in front of us.
Yeah, you're so right. The data tells us not only are more billionaires been created since 2020, but more millionaires are created during recessions than any other time, whatever even recession means. And I think you make a really good point about that. This live below your means thing, it's interesting to me. When I actually meet a legitimately wealthy person, and I am one also, the commonalities are striking and they're simple things. Like, I want to just accent something you said there, and I want to maybe talk about it a little bit more too. Living below your means is an absolute. There's this vogue thing out here right now on social media, everyone says, get rid of all the money you make because it'll keep you hungry, right? Get rid of all the money you make, which is really stupid advice said during booming economies, which sounds really good when money just keeps flowing in. But what happens if and when that gets reduced or if and when that slows down? So it's like the worst advice by a bunch of people that don't know what they're talking about, that got wealthy like in the last 3 or 4 or 5 years. I've been wealthy for 30 years. You've been wealthy a long time. The things we talk about actually work, right? And so I've lived below my means. And I want to just say this to everybody. I'm talking about like being a crazy person going, you know what? I spend $4 on a coffee at Starbucks. I can make one at home for 90 cents. I'm saving the $3 in some sort of save. Are you that nuts about it? Because I think if you don't save money when you don't have a lot, you're probably not going to save money when you do have a lot.
Absolutely. It's a habit. Like how you build wealth is a habit. And when you start developing that habit, when you have a little, whatever you develop, you're going to do the same thing when you have a lot. Yeah. So, I mean, I could go at any point in my life, I could have went and bought the Rolls Royce, the Bentley, the whatever. And I just couldn't do it. I couldn't bring myself to do it. I still drive a car. I never buy a brand new car. I never have debt on bad debt or car payments. I buy like my Range Rover I bought 3 years old, and I parked it right next to a client of mine that had a brand new one that paid $140,000 for it. And I'm like, that is the stupidest thing. Like, why wouldn't you buy it 3 years old? You could have got it at half price. Yes. You know, so I don't understand. I think the way the litmus test that someone can decide right now if they're living beyond their means is this one little tactic is if you can't save, if you can't invest 20% of your money right now. If I say to you, the only way that you can get wealthy is to take 20% of what you're earning right now and you need to start investing it, here's what you invest in. And if you say, oh my gosh, I can't do it, you're overspending.
I so totally agree. And what's really great about this conversation is almost no one talks about this anymore. Yeah. Like, it's completely counterculture. Now it's like spend everything you make. I bought my first new car for my wife, by the way, not for me, last year. And I'm 51. I don't buy new cars. People go, man, your jets are unbelievable. They are unbelievable, and they're a freaking fortune, and I've never bought a brand new one. Yep. Why would I do that? Why would I buy a G550 that someone paid $55 million for that 24 months later I can pay $22 million for? And 36 months later, I can pay $15 million for. And I know those are huge numbers, but why would I spend $120,000 on a Range Rover where 18 months later I can buy the same damn thing for $68,000 or whatever the heck the math is on it?
Right.
I'm totally with you on that. Because I think, and by the way, if you're in a relationship, there's just two types of people in life. There are savers and spenders. And if you live alone, you're either a saver or a spender. You want to build the habit of being a saver and an investor. If you're married to somebody, I hope at least one of you is a saver. Here's a formula for a broke marriage. 2 spenders.
Yes.
Do you agree with that? 2
100%.
spenders that are in a marriage together are toast. They cannot physically make enough money to ever get wealthy because they spend. So I'm with you on that. Okay. Someone's listening and they say, all right, I'm actually listening to this and I have a job. And I don't think I always want to have one. The self-employed thing sounds a little better, but the business owner thing sounds really good. You have something in here that you talk about how to start a business while keeping your steady paycheck. I think you and I did it the same way in the same industry, but I'll let you talk about what you think one of those ways is.
So the easiest way to keep your job and do something else is to find, what do you already have experience in? What do you have skills in? This isn't about like start posting on the internet that you're a business coach if you've never built a business. Like, it drives me insane. Like, have integrity, what you have experience in, what you have skills in, and you can start doing that on the side for yourself. It opens you up to building a business. You can get an LLC. It opens you up to tax savings, which we talk about in the book too. Like, when you are a business owner or a real estate investor, now you have the same thing that these massive corporations pay millions of dollars in lobbyists to get breaks. Now you have them too. So if you're doing something currently in your job, just do it for yourself. It could be going on Upwork or Fiverr. It could be, going to Facebook group in a community that you live in and say, hey, I'm an electrician, but I'm also taking a little bit of side jobs on the side. Contact me here. I've seen people build massive businesses, stringing lights and doing landscaping and turning into a real business so that they don't, it's easy for people to say, burn the boats, create the business. But sometimes if you have a family to depend on, that's reckless advice.
Man, like, you're totally right. And this is, again, everybody, why today is so important to me is I have real deep concerns about the advice I see being thrown around on social media and in a lot of coaching programs that will work when all of the economy is exploding.
Yes.
You almost, in a good economy, can't give somebody too much stupid advice because the tide keeps rising. Where you separate great advice from so-so or terrible advice is when the economy recesses to some extent. That's when all of the flaws in something is revealed. When there's a bunch of water flowing, you don't see all the rocks under the ocean. But when it starts to recess and the tide comes back, then you see the rocks and the bumps and the scary stuff. And so you're 100% right about that. If you have a family, maybe you shouldn't burn every single boat. Right. Maybe your kids need to eat. Maybe them going to school still matters. Maybe there's a transition period. Maybe there's a time where you're going to have 3 jobs, right? You're going to have your full-time job, another job, and your side hustle. And that's okay as well because it's going to make a great story for you someday.
And maybe you don't want to stress out your relationship.
Right.
You know, sometimes people burn the boats, go all in, and then they're completely stressed out of their mind because now they have all this responsibility. Yeah. There's another way that you can still build wealth and still have a great quality of life. And I think that's the most important part of the whole thing is it's like a lot of the advice I hear, which I think is what you're referencing, is it's like there's this all or nothing mentality.
Yes.
But in these difficult times, it's kind of like you said with the rocks are still there. You're just now seeing them, but they were always there. And I think with any industry, any vertical, any type of market, it's always going to. When we did research, I looked at the last 40 years of every market, the S&P 500, the real estate market, and it always pulls back.
Right.
So it's like, and when you really look at the chart over time, that's why wealth, business, relationships, it's playing the long game. Yeah. Because when you look at the chart, it always pulls back. But then in that opportunity, when you can double down because you've lived below your means, you've been able to invest, then you can double down in these dips and you can create more wealth than you ever would have if it was a straight up chart.
Oh my gosh, that's a fact. By the way, if it's a straight up chart, it doesn't let the little person ever get on the train.
Absolutely.
But when it dips is when small, economically small people like myself when I started, like when you started, it allows us to get into the game. If the chart just went straight up all the time, we've missed it.
That's right.
But when it dips, it's a good thing. That's what everybody needs to get. And I don't even know if we're in a big dip. We may be in a huge dip right now, and it may be not so big of a dip. I don't know. But what I do know is this is a great time to be living below your means, as is all the time. The other thing you said that I want to second, I get asked a lot, And I always want to say this with all the love that I can muster for somebody, but they'll say, hey, I want to be the best speaker in the world like you, or I want to be a coach. And I often say, I think the thing you probably should do first is build your resume.
Yes.
Like, do something first. Have some credibility to your message. Say, this is what I did. The reason I wanted you on is you built real wealth as a young woman. The thing you just said, though, that when you got there, my understanding is you got to a certain point and you were like, this isn't great. I mean, I've got a bunch of money, but my life is not what I thought it would be. And I relate to that on some level, that other parts of my life weren't as rich as they should have been by the time I got to being rich financially. Mm-hmm. And that there actually became a part of me in my life, which I now don't believe, but I wondered for a while, like, was this worth it? Mm-hmm. What it did to me emotionally.
Yeah.
What it did to me physically. Because the amount of work really required to win is a lot. And I didn't take care of myself during those years. I didn't take care of my emotional well-being. I didn't heal some things in me. I was like, I don't know about you, but I was always like, I'll get around to it once I'm rich.
Yeah.
I'm going to get to this thing. I probably should. And by the way, maybe if I get rich enough, it'll just like go away. Mm-hmm. So what about for you?
So it's interesting because I think that it's a common thought in society that money solves problems. Mm-hmm. And certainly it can make life easier in a lot of ways and fuller in some ways. But when that's the goal, if it's only to build money, if it's only to be rich, you've really missed the point of the entire thing. And so I started at 19 and it was about 25, 26 years old. I had a couple commercial properties. I had a couple flips under my belt. You know, I was buying foreclosures at $20,000, $30,000 and selling them for $100,000. Like, not crazy, but just enough that while some friends were doing the bar scene and, you know, all of the golfing and all of that, I was flipping houses on the weekend. Like, that's what I was doing.
Exactly the same.
And so, you know, but I was doing all of that. And I think what happened was at 19, if looking back, I realized that I was trying to run from something, right? I was trying to become something. I had so much leverage of not wanting to be poor, not wanting to ever depend on anybody, to not ever need anybody. Because I thought if I need somebody financially, then they can control me. They have power over me. Mm-hmm. And coming from the childhood that I didn't ever want to have someone have that control. And so I feel like I ran so hard that once I was getting there, if you will, I started getting there and having money and having all of these things. I was like, is this it? Like, did I climb this mountain? Did I get out of poverty? Did I overcome all of this for this? And I felt so empty. Like, I had more than I ever had in my life, but yet I felt empty. I'm like, how is this possible? And I had bought a building at the corner of town and I had no clue what I was going to do with it, but it was a good deal. And so I bought it. And I was driving by that building that day. I was in a black Escalade, had the shoes from the outside, all the things that the girls want, right? Yeah. And I'm like, what am I going to do with that building? And it was like a voice, just like us talking, said, put your animal shelter there. And I thought, I've never wanted an animal. Like, that was never a conscious thought in my mind. And it was like when I looked at that street and I saw the businesses that I owned and the buildings that I owned, and I heard that, it was like the recognition of everything I had and also what I didn't, all in the same moment. Because while I was trying to build wealth and build the business and become this thing, I realized that I was driving home to a guy I didn't even know if he loved me or cared about me. I had, friends that I wasn't even sure if they were really my friends or if it was just because of business and all of these other things. And when I heard that voice in that moment, it was like I realized that all of this really means nothing. That if the goal is to build money and have the things and to be rich, we actually miss the whole point of why we're here. Yeah. It's to contribute, it's to give, it's to make a difference. And so from that moment on, I took, again, in fear, no clue on how to start a nonprofit. I took every step forward on figuring out how to start a nonprofit and how to take this building that I bought and turn it into an animal shelter and start saving lives. And then, we grew on from there and developed a sanctuary and have programs for at-risk youth and kids that are abused. But yeah, so it's interesting when you're running from something that you sometimes forget to pause and realize how far you've come. Because sometimes those mountains, we get so focused on climbing that mountain that we don't realize that maybe this next mountain isn't for us to climb. Maybe we need to look back and acknowledge on all of those hills that we came through and see if maybe there's something we've missing. You know, sometimes I feel like we're so focused on what we want in life that sometimes we miss what we can actually have.
Oh, wow.
And that it might just be that much bigger and bolder than what we truly want.
Yeah, you're amazing. That's wonderful that you've done that, by the way. One of my favorite things ever said on the show, right there.
Oh.
In 500 shows or whatever it is. You know, we're a lot alike. And I think it's okay to be running from something. Like, the truth is, my main driver for many years was not to be rich. It was to not be broke.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I don't know if that's because, like, when my dad would drink, I was worried he was going to leave, and my mom was a homemaker and had no way to support our family, or I don't know what it is. But I know I've always been very much not wanting to be broke. And so I ran from that. Many people can relate to this. I know you did too. I ran from, like, whatever bad stuff happened to me when I was a kid. I wanted to get as far from that as I could. I ran from my lack of confidence. I ran from feeling insecure. I ran from fear, right? I ran from those things. And I actually think most successful people have that in common, and it's okay. But I want everybody to hear this, because I'm writing about it right now, but I just think what you just said is so eloquent. It's okay to be running from something, but at some point in that race, you have to begin to run towards what your dream is, towards what fulfills you. That'll only take you so far. And when you finally get away from it, like you said, I'm rich now, I'm no longer poor. You go, this was it? Because I never ran towards what I wanted to become. I didn't run towards what I wanted to create. I didn't run towards what I wanted to give. And it was only till later in life, maybe like 20 years ago, that I went, oh, I'm going to both not be back there poor, and I want to live richly. I want to give. I want to share my message with the world. I want to grow and contribute to people. So in the midst of running from something, if you're at that stage, it's okay. Just heed our advice. At some point, begin to run towards who you want to become as well. And what you'll learn is that you don't have to really run towards it. It's already within you.
It is.
And you just magnify more and more of who you've always been in there when you find your real home.
And that's all that money really is.
Right. It's a magnifier. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. I mean, if you are already a good person and you have a heart to help people, and maybe you're doing that right now in some way, like, all that money is going to do is give you that. It's going to magnify it. If you're a jerk, you're just going to be a bigger jerk with money. That's really all it is. It's going to magnify who you are. And so for me, it gave me the ability to, buy my dad a motorcycle and, be able to, like, just gift and donate and serve and start a farm and all these things. And I think that's really where it is. But I think where people get tripped up is they sometimes have the big idea. They have the big dream. And then it gets replaced with big fear of either not being enough or not, having the right education or not being from the right family. And so one of the things I did is really young, and I don't know where I got this from, but I started writing down all of the things I overcame on a list, like just literally writing it down. And if you're not driving, you're listening to this, I would encourage everyone to do this because I think it's a really powerful exercise. I've never heard anyone else talk about this, but grab a sheet of paper. And if you're struggling with something right now, if you don't know, like, what is this thing for me? Or I'm too scared to do this next thing, or I can't create wealth. I'm always going to be here because of X, Y, and Z. I want you to write down everything that you've overcome, everything that was sent to destroy you, everything that was meant to cripple you. And write down all of those things. Was it, losing a parent or losing a child or not being able to have a child or, suffering abuse in some way? Like, everyone has pain and trauma. And I want you to, when you're about to do this next thing, whether you get inspired from this and you want to go create wealth or start a business, and that fear creeps up, you got to pull out that list and review all of those things and remember who you are. Remember that you survived 100% of your worst days because you're still here. And if you can accomplish all of that, who's to say that this business or starting a Roth IRA or yada yada, it's all a joke because you've got through all of this other stuff. And I think that's so important for people to remember that how powerful they truly are.
Well, you're an example of that. Again, I only do one of these a week. And so the seat you're in is really precious to me because there's millions of people that are now extended part of my family. And when someone sits in that seat and is doing what you're doing right now, like, I'm really honored to be doing this. What you just said is like, it makes me emotional because you're 100% right. It also makes me emotional because I know a little bit more now about what you've had to overcome. You're like an example of this. And so you see this woman who very young starts these businesses. Dad's a mechanic, mom's cleaning houses, and she just grows up to become this amazing person with this amazing life. She's gotten wealthy. She's helped other people get wealthy. She teaches people how to get wealthy. She started the shelter. She's done all these other things. Yet you had your own form of abuse that you had to overcome. I just think if you're willing to share a little bit about it, you'd give a lot of people a lot of hope. So what was the main thing you had to overcome? A lot of different things, but what was the main thing you had to overcome?
Yeah. So, it's interesting. I haven't talked, when this originally happened, I probably hadn't talked about it for 20 years. And it's still something new that it's tough to share, to be completely transparent with you. But I do it because I feel that when people see us in a certain way, right, and they see us the way we are right now, they think, oh, that person had it easy, and oh, they don't understand my journey, and I've been through stuff. And I agree. I mean, 1 out of every 6 girls has been raped or sexually abused. And so I guarantee you there are tons of people listening. And I'm one of those 6. I was sexually abused as a child by a family member for a really long time. I really don't. Think I ever went back and, did a lot of that to try to figure it out, and that's okay. But it took 20 years to ever talk about it. And because of that, it's interesting. I've often thought, like, what exactly happens? I feel like there's almost like a part of your soul that dies when that happens, because you're never the same. Yeah. And you never make decisions the same way. And I feel like it's always something that you have to heal from. And it could be physical abuse for someone listening. It could be emotional, or, you're in a relationship with a narcissist. And whatever it is for you, the most important thing you can do is, number 1, don't let it define you. And when I was 15 years old, I heard for the first time in my life that you are a product of your decisions, not of your circumstances. And it was at that point I thought, this does not need to define me. I get to choose. Like, I can't control what someone does to me, but I can surely control what I do next. Yeah. And I wanted to be that person that no matter what, if somebody else is dealing with something,